Y'all know how I am on the intro. Welcome back to A Different Frame. I'm your co-host, Anisha.
And I'm Kendra.
And I'm Khadija.
And this is a podcast for the people, by the people. Now, this show is made possible by Alabama Values Progress, which is a communications hub that's dedicated to breaking the cycle of misinformation during the times where the truth is pretty hard to find. So we're constantly delivering facts, data, and receipts on what's happening in Alabama. Last episode, our first episode, I know, right? We had an opportunity to just introduce our listeners and our viewers, those who are watching us via your mobile devices or computer, what have you, the vodcast version. Had an opportunity to introduce Alabama Values Progress, share a little bit about what you can expect from us during this season. And during this season, we're pretty much focusing on the redistricting cycle here in Alabama. So if you did not get a chance to check out episode 1, do check out that episode because Kendra did an awesome job of just taking us down memory lane, right, Kendra, and just sharing how we got here. How far back did we go?
We went all the way back to 1901 when the Constitution was passed, and they said, "Hey, we're going to redistrict every 10 years."
Yes,
which we know they
didn't. Yeah. And then we also, for those of you who are not sure, wasn't understanding, why should you get involved with redistricting? Why should you even care? We took the opportunity to just show you how redistricting was connected to so many core issues that we all should care about, such as education, healthcare, voting, representation. Yeah, all of those things. So let's just dive into episode 2. The people spoke, but did they listen? Kendra, why don't you tell everybody what we have on tap today?
Yeah, so as Anisha just said, our theme today is the people spoke, but did they listen? And what does that really mean? We're going to take a look back at the public hearings and just kind of dive into what the people said and show you how really the committee really didn't listen to them. Thinking back to the public hearings, a common theme we saw from people who spoke was that they just absolutely did not like the 2011 maps. They didn't really feel like that they represented their communities. And I mean, this was statewide. This wasn't just, in one public hearing. It was in all 28 public hearings. Or of course, there's a few public hearings that didn't actually happen because no one showed up, but we can talk about that a little bit later too.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were upset that their communities were divided. And I'm not talking about just the larger cities that we would expect to be divided because of their population, but smaller cities that are, this big that were divided into 3 or 4 different districts. And, they didn't really understand why their neighbor might have a different, representative than they did.
Yeah.
And some consequences to that was a couple of people spoke at, I think it was the Hoover public hearing, and they said that, they had natural disaster, specifically a tornado, and they had to go and track down several different representatives just to get some aid to try to help clean up their town, which was really aggravating for them to have to, find one representative and then go see if they could find the other one just to get some help. So
I remember that. I remember some of the testimonies, you had some of the community members saying, "Hey, you don't even serve. We don't see you." The lines are drawn in a way, to where you're serving as you're representing one portion of your district, but we rarely see you. In one of the hearings, I think it was actually the first hearing, the public hearing in Huntsville, man, you all they really came out and just really expressed concerns, not just about the way the lines are currently drawn, but also about the redistricting process, period, in Alabama. They talked about the lack of transparency in the partisan, politics. I think we actually have a clip. I think it was actually Dexter Strong's testimony where he called for an independent redistricting committee. Let's play that clip.
Yes, I have one more follow-up question.
And state your name for the record for the court reporter, please.
Yes, Dexter Strong. I was here once before. I had one more follow-up question.
I know, but the court reporter needs you to
say.
Yeah,
gotcha. I understand. Thank you. During this special redistricting session, my understanding is that this commission could introduce legislation to augment the constitutional requirement that only the legislature control redistricting. And if not during this special redistricting session, in the upcoming general session, because I think the issue at hand, although we're making suggestions, there's not a procedural mechanism that ensures oversight and protection for people that look like me. And throughout this state's history, what I've experienced or what others have experienced is without those mechanisms for protection, y'all will not protect unless an outside entity makes you protect. So in the interest of, because you're committing to drawing these districts and what you define as fair. But unfortunately, historically, Alabama's definition of fair hadn't always been fair. So are either of you in this commission interested in introducing legislation that augments the Constitution so that we can introduce to our redistricting process a nonpartisan commission, or doing it in the upcoming 2022 general session?
The call to the special session issued by the governor typically limits what the legislature can consider. There are some ways around that, but it's expected that, as was done in past times, the call for the special session will be a 5-day special session, which is the minimum amount of time allowed to pass a bill. And if it doesn't include other such bills that you mentioned, then that's not something that the legislature can take up without procedural maneuvering. The best thing for you to do is to advocate to your local representative. That's what they're for, is to hear your voice and to act on that. I know Ms. Hall is there today. I don't know if she's one of your representatives, but your other representatives in the House and Senate, advocate to the change that you want to make. That is most. The committee can't really do anything about that today. What we're trying to do is fairly limited in getting testimony about how it should be reshaped. But thank you for your comment.
Wow, I have so much to say.
But thank you for your comment, though. Thank you for your comment.
Right. So was he just going to, I don't even know. Okay.
Yeah. He skirted past, and also, I mean, he skirted past the fact, even in his answer, I mean, I'm sure it seems like Dexter Strong knew that he was going to respond with that type of answer.
Right.
Because even in Dexter's testimony, you know, he led in saying that, you know, I mean, that you all have the ability to make some changes.
They do, and they haven't. Like, even what Kendra took us all the way back to 1901, every redistricting process ends up in litigation because they don't do right unless they're being told to do right by federal oversight. But since Shelby County versus Holder case in 2013, that entire federal oversight is removed now. So that's even doubling back on going back to what Kendra said last episode about it not being an accountability in those aspects. Yeah. And then I also like what Dexter said about having an independent commission. I think that Alabama should definitely have one. And currently there are 17 states that have independent redistricting committees, and those are Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Missouri, Montana, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, Vermont, and Washington. And I would say if Alabama were to create one, they should model what California does, because their system seems to be pretty feasible.
Yeah. And for the viewers and listeners that may not understand the difference between states that have independent redistricting committees and states that have, you know, that goes through the legislative body, such as Alabama, can you just explain the difference between?
Yeah. So like some of those states have independent redistricting committees where they have different citizens decide where those lines are drawn, and other states leave those hands into the hands of the legislators. So for California, they have a 14-person commission and an application process. So it starts off as the state auditors panel They take applications, and it's no limit on how many applications, but out of those applications, they select 60 potential redistricting commissioners, would be 20 Democrats, 20 Republicans, and 20 other unaffiliated.
Sounds fair. That sounds fair and balanced. Okay.
Yeah. And so then from there, the state house and the Senate majority and minority leaders each can eliminate 2 nominees from each political category. And so what that would do, that come out to 8 redistricting commissioners, which will be 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 unaffiliated members. And so they're randomly selected from the remaining pool of candidates. And so then from those 8 get to decide, they select 2 additional Democrats and then 2 Republicans and 2 unaffiliated members. So it's a whole breakdown. And I think it kind of eliminates the idea of nepotism. And so then from there, if you want to approve a map, that requires 9 votes, including 3 from each political category of members. So if you have 7 people that don't agree with you, that map won't pass. So it gives everybody a fair chance and a fair opportunity to have a map.
So it's almost like, an effort to remove politics out of the process.
Yeah. It's a huge effort.
So if you remember, I asked them, like, specifically at the public hearings, like, if it was going to be nonpartisan, and Dorman Walker, their attorney, was like, he didn't think that, it could be removed, that politics could be taken out.
Oh, I remember that. That didn't go well. We actually have that clip. Let's play that clip.
Would you please give the citation for the deviation of one person in the congressional district? Several people have asked over the last few days, and constituents would like answers. Also, will the redistricting and mapping process in Alabama be nonpartisan? Who specifically was responsible for promoting the hearings to the public? Also, considering hearings were made to get public input, is there a reason why only one of the 28 hearings was planned after 5 p.m., which is accessible to many working individuals?
So I don't have that site. You can ask Jim Blacksher for that. Different schools of thought about whether redistricting should be partisan or nonpartisan. There's a healthy school that says it's an inherently partisan activity, although perhaps you could have too much partisanship, and that was an issue recently dealt with by the Supreme Court. The Reapportionment Committee, has both Republicans and Democrats on it. Typically, states in which there is an avowedly nonpartisan redistricting do that by a redistricting committee, but there again, the members of the committee are appointed by politicians. So I'll leave it to you as to whether or not you can really get politics out of redistricting. I'm doubtful myself, but if you want to pursue that as a goal, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was really bad. Like, he was like point blank, like, you can't take it out.
Horrible.
Like, it's completely political. But it got worse, y'all.
It's supposed to be a nonpartisan process, and he just said, I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, fair man.
On public record, y'all.
Yeah, and then he even put the word healthy in there, trying to make their way seem like it was just because he put some words on there. Right. That just because he put that it's healthy, that it's, absolutely how we should do it. But if other states are doing it, then we can definitely do it. But y'all, at the next public hearing, I turned his words around and asked him again, how can you keep it, if it's not political, then how is it fair? And then, how they have that caveat in their rules where they are not going to pit incumbents against each other. I guess, that's their way of just ensuring their job security. And he got really mad at me. I think we have a clip of it too. And he said, fairness is in the eye of the beholder. And I don't even know how to respond to that, really. I mean, can we look? I think we have that clip. Can we look at it too?
A final comment from Kendra Majors. In the earlier hearing, you vaguely touched on the fact that redistricting in Alabama is not really nonpartisan. How does that work to guarantee fair districts and fair representation for all Alabamians, given that one party overwhelmingly controls the Alabama legislature currently?
I'm not going to answer that question. Fairness is in the eyes of the beholder, and I think that's where I'll leave it.
No other questions or comments.
So he actually said fairness is in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, I don't really know how to respond to that because, like, he's the attorney for the committee and ultimately the legislature who's in charge of drawing these fair maps.
So you see what his answer was. It's not clearly fairness in his eyes, and there will be no fair maps. That's what it sounded like to me.
Yes. Yeah. So it makes the point that our state would benefit from an independent committee.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't want it to be one of those committees that are like chosen by whomever. I feel like it should model California's.
Yeah.
So,
I think that what you showed from California was a great example of what we could actually do in this state if we followed California's model.
Right.
But
yeah. So the public also, they showed up and definitely, questioned the process, talked about the lack of transparency and accountability. But the community also came to speak a little bit about the impact that they're seeing as it relates to the unfair mapping practices. One testimony that stood out to me was the one in Montgomery from Aquanetta Pool, where she really talked about, think about the children. Like it just really, because when you think about it, the way the lines are drawn is going to impact. 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a 8-year-old child where the way these lines are drawn, they're going to feel the brunt of that up until they're 18.
Yeah.
That's a long time. Yeah. So let's play that clip. We have that clip with Aquanetta Pool. Let's play that.
And I asked, why are you putting our children at risk in harm's way, cutting off their life support? Give our Black and brown children a chance to make it out of this design plan that has held them captive, the pipeline to the prison system. That's the direction that they're going.
Yeah. So if you think about in episode 1, we talked about how redistricting is connected to education. And we talked, and Khadija, you did a great job. You shared that map that just showed how we have 8 school board districts.
Yeah.
And how you can clearly see that they're racially gerrymandered.
Yeah.
And how that impacts like the funding and resources that these schools receive. When Aquanetta Pool was talking about the school to prison pipeline, that's another show in itself.
Yeah, because that redistricting process definitely aids in the school to prison pipeline. It's connected to everything like we talked about last week.
Yeah. So also we had this is why we have to stay involved in the process, and as well as educate our children about the process as well, because they'll be the next A Different Frame co-host or be the next community member speaking at the public hearing, right?
Yeah. And just like I think he was like 16 who spoke in Montgomery about, how he felt about the districts being drawn, and he came and brought so many receipts and drawing so many facts on his area. And I think he lived in Montgomery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
he really schooled them. Like, he really had, a really great testimony, like spitting out those facts to the committee, and he was really prepared. It was really awesome.
And he's definitely the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we have that clip.
Good afternoon, Chairman McClendon, Vice Chair Pringle, and other distinguished members of the Joint Commission. My name is Cleo George Washington II. I reside in Congressional District 2, and I am a sophomore at Lamp High School here in Montgomery. I was 5 years old when the Alabama legislature passed the congressional redistricting maps in June of 2011. So this is my first opportunity to speak before the Joint Commission. Thank you. I encourage this committee to consider changing the congressional district lines to comply with the intent and spirit of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was to prohibit discrimination of voting by removing barriers that were put in place after slavery ended and provide greater opportunity for Blacks to elect representatives of their choice. As you are aware, Section 5 of the law was validated by the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. That section dealt with the requirement of pre-clearance. Today, I would urge the committee to focus on the other important part of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, A bipartisan Congress in 1982 amended Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to allow a cause of action where the voting process has the effect of diluting minorities' voting power. My reading of the law and Supreme Court decision Thornburg versus Gingles in 1986 is that proof of racial bias is not required to prove a violation of Section 2. Instead, if the district map change has the effect of diluting the voting strength of minorities, then it can be in violation of the Voting Rights Act. It is clear congressional redistricting maps passed after the 2010 census have had the effect of diluting the impact of minority voters in CD2. I will refer you to Exhibit A, which shows CD2 was competitive between Democrats by 1% in 2008 and Republican Martha Roby won by 2% in 2010. It is equally clear CD2 is now non-competitive. Exhibit B is the current map for CD7, which includes Birmingham. CD7 has 63% Black residents, which I recommend reducing to 53%, which would allow it to maintain its status as a majority minority district. Exhibit C is the current map for CD2, which has 30% Black residents, which I recommend increasing by 10% for a total of 40% Black residents. Effective proposal. Republicans continue to dominate 71% of congressional districts, 5 out of 7 instead of 6 out of 7. Today, Republicans control 85% of CDs, even though the combined minority population has grown to 35%. This change will create a fair opportunity for minority voters under the principle of one person, one vote, to collect a candidate in a competitive CD2. This proposal also is consistent with requirements of 1, contiguity, 2, compactness, and 3, community of interest. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, like most of America, Alabama is going through a transformation. It is becoming more and more diverse. As a result of the growing diversity, Alabama added over 250,000 new residents over the last decade to bring our total population to 5,024,000. Most of these new residents are minority and deserving of an opportunity to have a second member of Congress. Thank you.
Wow.
I know. I'm over here looking like a proud auntie.
Right. Because he came prepared. He walked up there with the papers, passed them out. Like, he didn't flinch. Yeah. He didn't stutter. Nothing. He knew what he was there for.
And a plan, y'all.
A plan.
A plan.
He did. He had recommendations that was more than what the committee brought to the public hearings. I mean, because I can recall some of the community members doing their public testimonies. Some of them actually thought they were going to hear some recommendations, right? They were going to see some proposed maps, and that was not the case. So, round of applause to this young man.
Remember Cleo George Washington, y'all.
I know,
right?
The future. We may see him on a ballot one day. Who knows?
Who knows? We might. You're right.
Yeah. So much. When you say, Kendra, that much of the public hearings went like this in terms of just concerns about the process, concerns about representation, and just a call for fair mapping and removing politics, out of the process. Fair maps shouldn't be a Republican versus Democrat or Democrat versus Republican, vice versa. It shouldn't be that. That shouldn't come into play. However, towards the end of the hearings, you can tell that the committee really became agitated, as community members would continue to express concerns about the process or pose questions. I think even one of them you asked, was it, how can we participate fully in this process?
Yeah, well, and here's what I think we were asking more specifically, how can, number one, if people who aren't there, who aren't able to make the, public hearings, how they can submit their own testimony, and actually pretty much contradicted themselves majorly, because at the beginning, the first week, they said, hey, as long as you turn them in by the last day of the public hearings, which was September the 16th, we'll accept them. So then we asked the follow-up the day before, and they were like, oh, no, we'll take them past that. So it caused a lot of confusion because we weren't really sure if they can be trusted, as we showed that clip, before of Dexter saying that. But they said one thing at the beginning of the public hearings, and then not even 2 weeks later, they were saying another thing. And, all people wanted to know is when they had, when could they participate, and how can they, when would it be counted if they did participate? And they totally changed the whole course, in one sitting. it was almost like they're flying by the seat of their pants and they don't really know what they're saying to the people.
Right.
And to be honest, I still don't know when maps are due. When I say that, we heard September 16th, and then we heard up until the special session. I don't know. Like,
I turned mine in like last Friday.
Yeah.
Like so it's weird. It's weird.
So let's play that clip. Like I know the listeners are like, okay, what do you mean? Like the contradiction? They should have given a date, right?
Yeah.
Question from from Felicia online. It says, when is the deadline to submit maps?
The hearings wrap up on September 16, and after that, the record of the hearings will be delivered to the legislature. The preliminary meetings maybe with legislators are going on now, so I would use the 16th of September as a deadline to submit through this process maps to the committee. Now, of course, you can always meet with your local legislator and submit something through the cooperation of your local legislator as well. But with regard to submitting things through the redistricting committee, the 16th of September is an effective deadline.
A question from Kendra. Just want to make sure that we all have the correct information so there is no confusion on comments and maps. At the Dothan public hearing, you said the map should be turned in by September 16th, and then in the previous hearing today, you said that comments could be submitted after September 16th. Just to clarify, how long do constituents have to submit comments and maps to be considered and placed in the public record?
The sooner you get them in, the better. If you send them in, they will be placed in the public record up until the start of the legislative session. If you want someone to look at them, though, you need to give them time to look at them.
Yeah. So listening to that again, I did not realize how agitated he sounded at me for asking that.
Well, I mean, and I think it's to point out, first it was September 16th, then it was up until the legislative sessions. But this is what got me, y'all. He said, if you want someone to look at it, you need to turn it in with enough time for them to look at them. That should go both ways because let's be clear, the maps, the proposed maps, let's see, the reapportionment committee is meeting on October 27th. October 26th, which is today at 1. And the proposed maps that they'll be reviewing was actually dropped on Twitter by Representative Chris England, but it has yet to come out officially out of the reapportionment committee for us to just view. So again, I just found that the irony in that, if you want someone to review the maps, you want to give them enough time to look at them, but that didn't go for the public to provide input. So anyway, but yes, Kendra, I agree. I can definitely see how it was you could tell it was a little bit agitated. Speaking of, like I said, being agitated, like I said, as the hearings went on, it got to the point where they stopped taking comments and questions around certain things. And throughout the hearings, you would hear, if they didn't want to answer a question, oh, that's out of the scope, right? That's out of the scope of the hearings. Whereas we can all see, questioning the transparency of the process, how that is very much so in the scope. So I think we actually have a clip, Kendra, where you were asking, what were you asking? You were asking in terms of...
Yeah, we were just trying to get them to explain why they did not have but one public hearing after working hours, because we saw in 2011 that they had 10 days, 10 hearings that were after, working hours, so that, the average working person would be able to attend and participate. But this time we only had one. And we were just trying to hold their feet to the fire and get answers, because that's not really fair to working people. They can't take off to come to 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
Right.
And I know we'll show the clip in a second, but if it shows anything, is they had the Selma public hearing was at 4 p.m. Y'all, Selma, Alabama, no one showed up except for Miss Aquanetta Poole. We heard from her earlier. She showed up at that meeting, but no one from Selma was there. But it was at 4 p.m. Who can come to a meeting at 4 p.m.? Like,
Right.
that's just a terrible time.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just really, but you can tell in the video that they just don't like to be challenged, ever. So we
Yeah.
can show that video just so people can see what we experience.
Do we have any?
Yes. From Kendra, will you be filtering out comments that are deemed out of the scope of the redistricting process? If so, who will be responsible for determining what's out of scope?
I'm not sure what that question is. The court reporter is taking down everything that's said, and that will be the record of the of the hearing. The court reporter has a duty to record everything accurately, and she will attest at the end of the transcript that that's what she's done.
We also have a question from Felicia Scalzetti. Mr. Walker stated earlier that this cycle had the most reapportionment public hearings that has ever been held, but to my count, there were 29 public hearings in 2011, of which 10 of those hearings were held after working hours. This cycle, we have had 28 hearings and only one has been after working hours. From Kendra, if the purpose is to solicit comments from Alabamians, the hearing has to be accessible. My question is, why did you give a schedule that is inaccessible to most working Alabamians?
Kendra, it's clear that you have a problem with the schedule, and you've made your point on that. Thank you.
From Felicia, to follow up on the point I made about the schedule, during a hearing yesterday, Mr. Walker stated that complaints about the scheduling of the hearing during working hours and working hours, that the committee would look into having evening hearings in 10 years. However, we already had evening hearings in 2011. There is no reason to change if this cycle and then change it back in 2030.
Thank you for your comment. Don't read any more comments about the schedule. If people have comments that are helpful and germane to the purpose of the hearing, please read those.
I think it was very helpful to the hearing, though. Like, don't read any more comments unless it's pertaining to the hearing. I think it was pertaining to the hearing, right?
Yeah, and let's point out that there were comments, towards the end of that hearing, that just went unanswered. Because at that point, you can tell that the person reading the comments was like, okay, what do I read? What don't I read? So you were, they were leaving it up to that person to decide, okay, well, what comments are germane to the hearing? Like, what comments should I be reading? And as a result of that, we saw that a lot of comments went unread towards the end of that hearing, and they just stopped taking comments pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And and later on in that day, which was that whole conversation happened the last day of public hearings at one of the earlier hearings. But like later on in the day at the last public hearing, we saw them go through their script super duper fast. And then, they didn't Pringle and McClendon, who, are the chairs, they went through their normal, welcome and laying out the rules and stuff. But then Walker didn't even go through his whole spiel, because we've seen in previous, hearings where it would take them, between 10 and 15 minutes to get through all that. And the whole public hearing from start to finish in Wadley was 4 minutes and 59 seconds.
Look, I know, right? It sounds like some change, right? 4 minutes and 59 cents. But no, 4 minutes and 59 seconds. And let's be clear, when you say from start to finish, meaning from him reading, because I think they open every hearing reading just the guidelines and setting the stage. So I can literally paint you a picture. So they open it up and they did their usual spiel. McClendon talks, Pringle talked, they gave their regular guidelines and information. And then Walker immediately asked for a sign-in sheet. And y'all, in our recordings, we were at 4 minutes and 22 seconds into the meeting when he asked for this. Then he asked if anyone wanted to speak online or give comments. And this is at 4 minutes and 34 seconds. And no one says anything. But if you think about it, nobody has time yet to talk or even to type in anything in the chat. And then at 4 minutes and 47 seconds, he gave a last call for comments. And then he closed the hearing at 4 minutes, 59 seconds. And
wow.
he didn't read his rules. Like he normally has this long thing that he talks about what the rules are set, and then he didn't do that. And then after, some people were like, hey, we were trying to type in a question in the chat. Like they put it in there afterward, but they had already closed the meeting. So you can tell it was the last public hearing and they weren't really into having a public hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now we're on, after wrapping up the public hearings, we're on to the special sessions. Governor Kay Ivey has called a special session, which is going to kick off on October 28th. And I encourage all of our listeners and viewers of the podcast to just stay connected and get involved in the process. So definitely tune in into future A Different Frame episodes. The podcast is streaming on all platforms, and you can catch the video version of the podcast on social media platforms and our website. So like, follow, subscribe, and share. Stay connected with the latest news and updates regarding the special sessions, and connect with our partner organizations that are on the ground fighting for fair maps.
Yeah, so join us next time on A Different Frame for episode 3. It's go time, where to tap in, and it's the day before session, and we will share the updates regarding schedules, community resources, and more.
All right.